I think something that's not very well understood in how it relates to these circles is the whole issue of hypocrisy. And I think it's a very easy label to kind of give a lot of people in these circles. Because let's be honest, a lot of people in these circles are very shy. They probably don't have much experience with women in a lot of cases. They might not have had a real job. They might be underemployed. They might be unemployed. They might have taken a bad degree in university, that sort of thing. A lot of people in these circles aren't exactly paragons of, well, anything. And people come into these circles when they start getting exposed to these ideas like masculinity, like Christianity, nationalism, traditionalism, all these kind of different high-minded ideas that in no way reflect the kind of life they live or really the person who they are. And people get exposed to these things, and I think kind of innately, either through reason or just through aesthetics or something, they come to think this is right, this is true. Chivalry is a good thing. Gender roles are a good thing. Christianity being the state religion is a good thing. My people have a right to exist. And they come across these ideas and they kind of internalize them and they say they're good things. But as an individual, they're not really able to necessarily live up to them. They aren't necessarily able to just overnight become like a paragon of knightly Christian virtues, or just to become kind of like an alpha male or a Chad or something. A lot of the people just aren't, and they might not ever be able to live up to that. They might not ever be able to be the kind of like, in kind of more, I guess, a conservative way, the rugged individual. The guy is able to go into the forest with like a Bowie knife and kill like a moose, and then skin the moose and like salt it right there, and that kind of thing. Or be the guy who's able to have like 6 kids and a successful career on top of it, and like a beautiful wife and that kind of thing. They might not be able to kind of live up to this idealized image, or to this I guess you could say archetype. So there's a couple different ways of looking at this. One that's very common is in order to avoid self-criticism. Now, I'm just going to kind of come out and say it. It's not hypocritical if you don't excuse yourself from the standards you're applying. That is, if you say, oh, the norm should be for men to get married and have children. I haven't done it, but I'm defective, or I'm not following the ideal of what I should be doing as a man. That is not hypocritical. It's not hypocritical to talk about like the glory of serving in the army and like feats of arms and that kind of thing, while going, look, I'm too cowardly and weak to actually do that myself. These are things that we should like as a society and that we should idealize as a society, but I just don't have the capacity necessarily for them myself. And I think that's fine. I think that's very hard for a lot of people to admit to. I think it's very hard for people to say, I can have these ideals, but I can also accept that I don't have to live up to them. And Mark Stein talked about this when he was talking about school shooters, and how the men never charged the school shooter, and how whenever the men never charged the school shooter, no one ever criticizes them for it. And he's like, no, they should have done that. And then people are like, well, Mark, you would have been like pissing yourself. And he's like, maybe that's true, but it's better to have a social expectation of courage than to assume cowardice. I mean, very few people live up to ideals. Very few people have that kind of thing. But I think the point of this whole movement is the idea that we need to change what society considers good back in the right direction. Even if we can't live up to it ourselves, there's nothing wrong with promoting something you can't live up to. Like, let's look at careers. I think science is very important. I think science and technology and all that stuff is very important, and funding the education stuff for it is. I don't have the training or the background or whatever to do like engineering or biology or any of that stuff. But that doesn't mean I can't advocate it. That doesn't mean I can't say it's a great thing. That doesn't mean I can't fund it through my taxes. That doesn't mean I can't promote it. Like, I'm a huge fan of NASA and space exploration. To promote NASA and to say I support NASA, I don't have to be an astronaut. I can just be someone who thinks that it's a good thing for society. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make is most of us will say we're very flawed. We're flawed people. To a certain extent, that's the fault of postmodernity. To a certain extent, it may be our flaws in ourselves. There was never an era in history where men were perfect. I think the difference is, and the thing that we're trying to talk about, and the confusing thing, is we're trying to, I think, rebalance the image of like what a man should be, what the ideal should be. Like in every age, you have this like Achilles or Charlemagne or Richard the Lionheart, and like 99% of people aren't going to live up to it. But the social expectation is very important. Another kind of good Mark Stein quote about this same subject was about when the Titanic sunk. And women and children went first, and it was just a very orderly evacuation of the ship. And he said that was an example of when social expectations worked exactly how they were supposed to work. It completely functioned. That was the expectation of what men were supposed to do and what women were supposed to do. And because of that, in that case, things worked out as best as they could in a horrible situation. Now, what a lot of people do, and this is where you kind of get the incels and some people like that, is rather than look at themselves and acknowledge their own faults and their own flaws, they come up with like an endless stream of reasons for why none of it is their fault. Like in a lot of cases, is there like also things are just complicated. There's no reason that it can't be feminism has made women worse, and you also have personal problems. Like these things aren't mutually exclusive. Most things in life are complicated and have a variety of different origins and a variety of different outcomes. But in the case of like a lot of the incel people, what it is they will not take any responsibility whatsoever for their role in it. So like I said, are women a lot worse now than they were in the past? In a lot of ways, yes. Sexual promiscuity has been promoted. Women have been told not to get married when they're young. There's a lot of things like that. But as part of the issue, a lot of these people are really creepy and weird. And I don't mean that in, I guess you could say, kind of an NPC way, but a lot of them are just very socially maladjusted. They might not have real careers. And they just have all this resentment and hatred within them. And not only do they blame society for what's happened to them, and I'm not saying society hasn't screwed them, but they aren't willing to really look at themselves and criticize themselves and do whatever they can to try to make their situation better. I mean, let's look at some other kind of examples of what I'm talking about. If you smoke cigarettes, but you're against cigarettes because you're addicted to them and you think it's a bad thing and you don't want other people to go down that path, that isn't being hypocritical. Because you're saying, look, I have this issue. I realize it's something that's not good. It's something I have been unable to stop. And it's a bad thing I've been unable to stop it. But the fact that I can't live up to the standard I set doesn't mean that I'm going to support something that's immoral. Like, to me, that's worse. You support something that's immoral to avoid self-criticism and to avoid hypocrisy, which I think is bad. Like, okay, well, let's look at some examples from me. I increasingly become very critical of pornography. I think it's a very bad thing. I don't think I've ever criticized people who use it because it's difficult. It's something I've struggled with a lot in the past. I think it's something most males have struggled a lot with. It's a very difficult thing. But just because I've struggled with it and I've had trouble kind of getting beyond it over the years doesn't mean I'm going to go out and say pornography is a good thing. It was fine that I was using it. That was a perfectly moral and productive use of my time. No, it wasn't. It was bad for me. And I don't think I should have been looking at it, and I don't think other people should look at it because it's just bad. I don't see what's so hard about that. I don't see why you have to try to like come up with some like justification for why it was okay. You don't even really have to take full responsibility for it. You just have to say, look, it's a very addictive thing. I shouldn't have been exposed to it, I don't think anybody else should be exposed to it. Same thing with cigarettes, same thing with alcoholism. Lots of things in life. You can say, I'm very shy and antisocial, but that's a bad thing. And if I have kids, I don't want them to grow up like that. And I'm going to take steps when they're young so they don't grow up like that. Once again, that's not hypocritical. The fact that you're just not something, but and you have to learn how to do this. And this is kind of part, I think, of being an adult, is learning to separate yourself from society, to separate the individual from the collective. And this is very, very difficult. This is one of the hardest things you can do. This is one of the reasons why our political system is so messed up. Because people are incapable of drawing this difference. What they'll do is they will say, oh, I know this like one nice person of insert X group there. That means all of them are okay. That means we can have unlimited immigration from that country. And that means that all stigma against that group is bad because I know one person who's okay, and they aren't able to separate it. They aren't able to separate, I guess, kind of the meta issue from the more local issue. Like, you might know somebody who's on this program, or you might know somebody who does heroin and they somehow do it responsibly. Or you might know somebody who drinks a lot, but they do it responsibly. But that doesn't mean that it's a good thing on the whole. It doesn't mean it's a good thing for society. And life is a lot about balancing society and the individual. And it's something that there's no actual answer for. In political science, we call it an essentially contested concept. That means there is no decisive way to, like, there's no, like, you can't make a dictionary definition. It's something that people are always going to have a mixture of opinions on. So my point being, when I talk about a lot of things, and it sounds like moralism on my part, I'm not necessarily saying that I haven't done these things or I don't do these things. What I'm talking about is ideally what you should be doing and what you should be working towards. Because, like I said, it's better for people to try to do these, and like maybe you go 20 or 30% of the way towards doing what you should be doing. That's a lot better than being 0% towards it. God doesn't ask us the impossible. He asks us to do what we can, to try to be the best people we can be. And not all of us can be the best people, but you just try to be the best you can with what's available, I guess is kind of how I view it. And I think that's a lot of what this community is, and that's why I love talking to you guys, and I feel sometimes I'm able to make a difference. A lot of us have issues. I'm bipolar. I freak out. I'm kind of socially awkward and shy in real life. I frequently have an abrasive and prickly personality. I can be obsessive. I can, like I said, I've struggled with pornography in the past. Addiction to the internet, addiction to video games, things like that. There's lots of issues that I've struggled with over the years. I have a lot of flaws as a person. I'm a deeply, deeply flawed person. I'm kind of cowardly in a lot of ways. Things like that. But the fact that I have those personal flaws doesn't mean that I need to come on here and try to justify them. Or not necessarily justify them, because you can say, look, this happened to me and that's why I'm not able to do this. Because there's lots of extenuating external factors. Be it you have a biological issue, you were raised in an abusive household, maybe you were just beat down by society. You don't even need to accept responsibility for it, but you have to just say, look, this isn't the ideal. This isn't where something should be. And it's immoral to me to say, okay, I have this bad thing I'm doing, and I'm going to tell other people it's okay and try to influence them to do the same thing, just so I don't have to admit that something's imperfect. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully that kind of gives an insight into kind of how I talk about things, etc. Because I know I sound like I have a lot of moralism and high-minded idealism, But what I'm trying to really get at is say, this is what we should be striving for. These are kind of the ideals we should hold, even if we can't live up to them, which we can't always do. But it's better to aim for purity than to assume degeneracy. It's better to idealize the nuclear family than just to assume that everyone's going to be a single mom. It's better to believe, to glorify sacrifice for the nation than just to assume you're going to be cowardly. And because these things matter, and a lot of people are deeply influenced by the society and the culture that they live in. And yeah, so I think that covers everything I wanted to say. It's a video I've been wanting to make for quite a while. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And as always, God bless, and thank you for watching.